The walls are closing in on Drake faster than anybody wanted to admit. New paperwork just dropped, and what's inside reads less like a music industry headline and more like a financial obituary. The whole OVO machine that Owl stitched onto everything for over a decade, all of it is sitting on a courtroom desk in British Columbia with a price tag attached, and the people holding the receipts are not playing nice. So, let's get into it, because the deeper you dig, the worse it looks, and by the time we're done, you're going to understand why Drake's finances might be one bad ruling away from a full-blown disaster. Here's the short version. A company called AIOVO Growth Capital LLC, registered out of Delaware, filed a notice of civil claim against October's very own ULC, the company Drake co-founded and owns the majority of. AII says OVO borrowed money, defaulted, partially paid it back, and still owes roughly $4.6 million, with that number climbing daily. And the kicker, the part that should make every Drake fan sit up straight, is that on a completely separate loan tied to the same lender, Drake's team put up the OVO name and the Owl logo itself as collateral. Read that again. The Owl, the brand, the intellectual property that defines the whole movement. They signed paperwork that allows a lender to come after that if things go south, and right now, things are going south. Let me walk you through how this even happened, because the timeline tells a story the team really did not want public. Back in early 2025, OVO was carrying weight nobody outside the room saw. The company was pulling impressive top-line numbers on paper, around $72 million in revenue in 2024, close to $400 million from 2019 through 2025. Those are the kind of numbers you drop into a verse to flex. But underneath those revenues, the books were bleeding. Negative EBITDA of roughly $8 million in 2024 alone, and around $12 million across the 3-year stretch from 2022 through 2024. So, while the timeline saw Drake talking about being the biggest, the actual brand was operating at a loss. That's not opinion, that's the paperwork talking. Around the same time, an affiliated company, October's very own merchandising, was already on the hook with Royal Bank of Canada under an existing credit facility. And here's where it gets personal. Aubrey Drake Graham, Oliver L. Khatib, and Noah Shebib, the man you know as 40, signed a side letter in February 2025 personally guaranteeing a slice of that debt. Personally, as in their own names. The co-founder, the partner, the in-house architect of the sound. All three of them put their personal signatures on a guarantee. That's not a corporate move. That's a we're all in deep together move. And the only way out of that personal guarantee was proving to RBC that $30 million in fresh equity had landed inside OVO merchandising. $30 million. They had to find that money. So, the company went looking. And in March of 2025, OVO contacted AII about both short-term bridge capital and a contemplated $30 equity-linked financing round. The investment materials they sent over basically said the majority of that $30 million was going to be poured into growth marketing, which is interesting on its own because by their own admission in the docs, OVO had never historically spent serious money on marketing. The brand, in other words, was about to switch from organic momentum to bought attention. Read that line a couple more times and let it sit with you, because that is not how a healthy empire moves. AII and OVO got introduced through a mutual connection and started talking about two separate transactions. One was a senior secured loan and the other was a set of convertible notes. Two different deals, two different sets of paperwork, two different sets of collateral, two different sets of consequences. On or about May 16, 2025, OVOP Holdings, an affiliate, signed a senior secured loan with Ares Senior Secured Growth Fund. That loan was a $10 million facility. The first piece advance was $2.5 million. And here is the line that everybody in the comments needs to read 3 times. That senior secured loan was secured by OVO's intellectual property collateral, including the rights tied to October's very own and the OVO Owl logo itself. The owl, the bird that's on the hoodies, the chains, the merch, the album covers, the bottle service, the tattoos. Aubrey Drake Graham co-signed paperwork that says if this loan goes bad, that owl is on the table. I want you to picture that. Picture Drake pen in hand signing off on a document that says the symbol he built into a brand recognized worldwide is now a piece of leverage. The same logo fans tattoo on their bodies. The same logo used as a flex against every other rapper in the game for over 10 years. He signed it away as a guarantee on a $10 million loan, and only $2.5 million actually got advanced before things started to wobble. That's not a financial decision a billionaire makes. That's a decision somebody makes when the room is on fire and they need water now. After that, OVO came back for more. Between July 14th and August 5th of 2025, the company issued 5 convertible promissory notes to AOI for a total principal of around $5,234,000. The notes broke down into pieces. One for $500,000, one for $300,000, one for $1.5 million, one for $3 million, and one more for another $500,000. 5 separate notes structured as 5U convertible debt instruments set to mature on June 30th, 2030. In the terms, this is where the team walked into a corner without realizing they were walking into a corner. 10% interest per year on the outstanding principal payable quarterly in advance on the first business day of each quarter. 2% extra interest on any overdue amount, and critically, a make-whole fee. A make-whole fee is a clause that says if the borrower pays the loan back before the maturity date, the borrower still has to pay an additional amount calculated. So, not only does OVO owe the money, AOI also had a paper path to becoming part owners at a discount to the rest of the market. The make-whole fee, the conversion rights, the discount, the valuation cap, every one of those mechanics was negotiated as one integrated bargain. You don't get to pull one piece out and pretend the rest doesn't exist. So, what did Drake's company do next? OVO started missing payments. The interest payments due beginning in July and August of 2025 were not paid on time, not within the 3 business day grace period either. Not actually remitted until January 2nd, 2026. Let that sink in. The company missed quarterly interest from summer 2025 all the way into the new year. And the first quarter interest of 2026, due January 2nd, 2026, was also not paid on time. That one didn't get sent in until February 19th, 2026. Each late payment was an event of default. Each one, by the terms the team signed themselves, those were defaults. And in some cases, when payments finally were made, they were not even sent to the right place. Certain payments went into an account held by an entity that was not AOI. The contract is very clear. That does not count. That just deepens the hole. On or about February 27th, 2026, AOI delivered a formal notice of default to OVO. The notice spelled out multiple events of default and reserved every right and remedy available under the financing documents and under the law. Then on March 20th, 2026, AOI and OVO signed a forbearance agreement. Forbearance, for the people who don't deal with this kind of paper, is essentially the lender saying we're not dropping the hammer right now. We're giving you a window to make this. Right, but you have to acknowledge every dollar you owe. OVO signed it. The company expressly acknowledged the existing defaults. They expressly acknowledged the indebtedness as valid, binding, and unconditionally owing, with no set-off, no defense, no counterclaim, no deduction, no reduction. In plain English, OVO admitted in writing they owed every cent AOI said they owed. There is no take-back, there is no rewind. Then the company made a partial payment while disputing the make-whole fee. So the team paid some, then turned around and argued the make-whole fee was something they did not have to pay, even though their own signed paperwork said otherwise. AOI's position is simple. The make-whole fee is part of the same single bargain. You don't get to cherry-pick, and the forbearance agreement they already signed locked in the fact that the debt was valid. They walked themselves into that one with their eyes open. Meanwhile, on March 31st, 2026, OVO Holdings repaid the senior secured loan, the separate one tied to the OWL logo collateral. That cleaned up that particular facility, but here's where everybody needs to slow down. The repayment of the senior secured loan did not satisfy, reduce, waive, compromise, or otherwise affect OVO's obligations under the convertible notes or the forbearance agreement. Two completely separate buckets. The team paid off the bucket that had the OWL collateral attached. But the bucket still leaking is the convertible notes, and the convertible notes are what OWL just sued over. So, the OWL is not automatically on the chopping block from this specific lawsuit. But, and this needs to live rent-free in your head, the team already showed they were willing to put the OWL up as collateral once. Once you do that, the conversation changes forever. The brand is no longer untouchable. The OWL is now a chess piece. They handed somebody else that chess piece. They cannot pretend they didn't. Then we get to the wire payment. On May 27th of 2026, AOI received a wire payment of $3.8 million from ADG Sound Management. ADG, Aubrey Drake Graham. The wire details flagged the payment reference as OVO notes. AOI took the money, but they took it under a full reservation of rights, on account only, not as full satisfaction. So, the man personally moved roughly $3.8 million as initials onto a wire to try to put this fire out. And AOI essentially said, "Thank you for the deposit. The rest is still due." As of June 11th, 2026, AOI says the remaining unpaid obligations are at least $4.6 million, including the outstanding make-whole fee, default interest, legal fees, professional fees, enforcement costs, lender expenses, and other recoverable amounts. And that number, the 4.6, is not frozen. It keeps growing. Every day the bill keeps climbing. Let me put this into a number you can actually feel. The company already paid them about $3.8 million, and the company still owes at least $4.6 million on top of that. Add those together and you are sitting on roughly $8.5 million on a $5 million principal note. They borrowed about $5 and are on the hook for somewhere around $8.5. That is the math. That is what the make-whole fee, the default interest, the legal fees, and the enforcement costs due to a man who tried to walk out early. He tried to peace out and the contract grabbed him by the back of the collar and dragged him back into the room. Now, pause on this because the cultural piece is just as important as the legal piece. This is the same Drake who built an entire decade of music around the flex, bottle service, private jets, bands on bands, mocking the broke. Drake has spent years putting people on the timeline for being short on bread. Right now, Rick Ross is taking heat in some corners of the internet with people quoting Drake's own lines back at him to suggest Ross is not what he says he is. The whole time, the man whose lyrics are being used as ammo is the one with a lender sitting in front of a judge in British Columbia saying, "You still owe us millions." How do you swing on people for being broke when your own intellectual property had to be pledged to a lender before you could even pull a bridge loan together? You don't get to be that guy in the booth and this guy in the courtroom. The internet has receipts now. He handed them those receipts in the filing itself. Why pay just enough to look like you're trying and not enough to actually win? The honest read is one of two things. Either he genuinely did not have the rest of the money sitting where everybody assumes he keeps it, or the team made the call to fight the make-whole fee in court instead of writing the check, which is a wild gamble when the collateral on a sibling loan was the OWL itself. Both answers are bad. There's no good answer. People want to clown others for flying commercial. People want to clown others for not having a private jet on standby. And the same circle doing that clowning are the ones who pledge their own brand as loan security. The exposure here is enormous. If the British Columbia court agrees with ARI and OVO still doesn't satisfy the judgment, the lender can move to collection. Collection proceedings worst case can target OVO's assets. That includes the OVO label. That includes the trademarks. That includes the OWL. Not automatically. Not tomorrow. Not without a judgment. But the door is open in a way it was never opened before. They opened it themselves when they signed the original collateral package. They opened it again when they failed to keep the notes current. They opened it again when they signed a forbearance agreement that explicitly acknowledged the debt. Every door that should have been locked, the team unlocked, and AOI is walking through them one at a time. The maturity date on these notes is June 30th, 2030. The Drake Company is on the clock until 2030, whether they like it or not. Even if they try to pay the rest off tomorrow, the make-whole fee still applies. Aries consent is required to prepay. The exclusive jurisdiction clause sends every dispute to the courts of British Columbia. There is no quiet settlement in another country to make this disappear. They built a 5U cage around themselves and threw the key into a BC courtroom. That is not a flex deal. That is a survival deal. That is the deal of someone who needed cash now and accepted any rope to climb out of the hole. 5 years, a $200 million valuation cap that lets the lender potentially buy in at a discount, a 20% conversion discount that compounds the lender's leverage, a make-whole fee that punishes early payoff, a default rate that bleeds you while you wait. These are not the terms of a thriving empire. These are the terms of a corner. And there is one more layer to this, the personal piece. Aubrey Drake Graham, Oliver L. Khatib, and Noah Shebib personally guaranteed certain OVO merchandising to RBC under the side letter from earlier. Personally. So, this story is not just about a corporate entity getting squeezed. The three names at the top of OVO are sitting on personal exposure inside the broader financing ecosystem. Drake is not just the face in this fight. He is the wallet, the brand, the signatory, the personal guarantor on a related obligation. If any of these dominoes tip the wrong way, the pressure does not just hit a holding company nobody can see. The pressure rolls right up the chain, and the chain ends at Drake. So, when somebody asks, how did Drake's empire get here? The answer is now public record. The brand was operating at a loss while the timeline only saw the wins. The team needed $30 million in equity to unlock other obligations. The team took on a separate $10 million facility secured by the OWL logo and IP. The team then stacked roughly $5 million in convertible notes on top with a make-whole fee that turned an early exit into a longer sentence. The team missed quarterly interest payments multiple times. The team signed a forbearance agreement admitting the debt was binding and unconditional. The team partially paid, disputed the make-whole, and still ended up $6 million short and rising. Drake's name appears on the wire that tried to pull the file along. Drake is the central figure on every page of this filing. The OWL is not gone. Let me say that clearly because the headlines are going to lie. The OWL is not gone today. The lawsuit Ari just filed is over the convertible notes, not the senior secured loan that was tied directly to the IP. The senior secured loan got paid off on March 31st, 2026. So, the OWL is not currently sitting under a forced sale order. But, the OWL is no longer the untouchable monument it used to be. The OWL is now a piece in play. And if Ari wins this case, gets a judgment, and OVO still does not pay, then yes, collection proceedings can reach toward OVO's assets, including the trademarks, the label rights, and the OWL itself. Not automatically, not without a fight, but possible. And the only reason it is possible is because the team set the precedent themselves by using the OWL as collateral the first time. That part is going to haunt Drake's legacy more than the $6 million. The 6 is just money. He can make 6 in a weekend if the right show lands. The bigger wound is cultural. He built the brand. He built the OWL. He turned October's very own from a blog into a global aesthetic. And he signed paperwork admitting that that brand could one day belong to somebody else if the wrong creditor walked into the right courtroom. That is going to live on the internet forever. That paperwork is filed. That document is time-stamped. That signature is real. You cannot delete it out of the docket. And the more you read these filings, the more it feels like the inner circle either let him sign something none of them fully understood or knew exactly what they were signing and assumed the money would always be there to clean it up later. Neither version is a good one. If the lawyers and financial people read this deal and signed off on a make-whole fee with a 20% conversion discount, a $200 million valuation cap, and IP collateral on the sister loan, then somebody in that room should not be in that room next time. And if Drake walked in himself, told them this was the move, and overrode the people who knew better, then his instincts about money look very different than the way those instincts have been marketed. You hear it in the lyrics. You see it on the timeline. You see it in the interviews. The whole brand of Drake is built on Drake being the guy who already won, the guy with the receipts, the guy with the bag, the guy who doesn't need anybody. And then you open up a note, took another loan on top, missed the payments, signed a forbearance, paid part of it, and still owes millions. That is not the guy who already won. That is the guy who is running out of room. The loyalists are going to spin this 6 different ways before sunrise. The OVO accounts are going to try to flood the timeline with everything except this story. But the docket exists, the numbers exist, the wire exists. You cannot rebrand a court filing. So, where does this go next? Here's options, but none of them are clean. Option 1. Pay the 4/6 in full, eat the make-whole fee, and the fight. That is the cheapest exit, but it means publicly admitting by paying that the terms they were disputing were always enforceable. Option 2. Fight the make-whole fee in court. Win on that piece, owe only the remainder. Possible, but the forbearance agreement makes it harder because they already acknowledge the debt as valid and unconditional. Option 3. Fight, lose, and ARI moves to collection. That is the nightmare scenario. Assets pursued, related obligations stacking. Every other lender the team has touched looking harder at the books. Option 4. Settle quietly somewhere in the middle. Take the L on the make-whole fee in some discounted form, and the public fight. That is probably where this lands. But even that leaves a paper trail that says Drake's empire borrowed against its own crown jewel and could not keep up with the payments. There's no version where he walks out clean, only versions where he walks out less dirty. And the man who built a career on looking spotless on camera is now sitting on a court file that is the opposite of spotless. The flex is gone. The illusion is cracked. The owl is on the table, and every fan who ever rocked that owl proudly is staring at a future where, depending on the next ruling, that symbol could end up under different ownership. That is not a vibe. That is not a rollout. That is not a snippet on Instagram. That is the cold paperwork of an empire that forgot to balance its own checkbook. If you are still trying to defend Drake, I get it. The catalog is the catalog. The hits are the hits. None of that goes away. The music will keep playing. The streams will keep streaming. But separate the music from the business. The artist can keep making records. The business is in a fight it cannot pretend it is not in. Both can be true at the same time. And if you only let yourself see one, you're going to miss what's actually happening to one of the biggest brands in modern hip-hop. The bigger lesson is that even the people on top borrow.